The 22nd of June, 1941. Under the code name Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany invades the Soviet Union, its ally in the war against Poland. Among the first territories to be occupied by Germany is Belarus, officially called the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, which prior to the Nazi invasion had been under Russian control for almost 150 years. Within just a week of the invasion, the Germans capture the capital, Minsk, and immediately implement their genocidal policies. Among the first to be targeted are the Jews, who are confined to ghettos, where they face extreme overcrowding, severe food shortages, and starvation. Along with the Jews, Hitler also intends to exterminate the Slavs, the dominant ethnic group in the region, whom the Germans view as racially inferior. As a result of Nazi policies, the local population is subjected to mass murder, shootings, starvation, and forced deportations. These brutal measures aim not only to decimate the local population, but also to clear the way for German colonization, aligning with Hitler's vision of Lebensraum, or living space in the East. The highest-ranking Nazi official in Belarus during the Second World War, responsible for countless atrocities, including killing innocent children, is Wilhelm Kube. Richard Paul Wilhelm Kube was born on the 13th of November 1887 in Glogau, then part of the German Empire. Kube grew up in Berlin, where he gained attention in high school for his anti-Semitic remarks. In 1911, he received a scholarship from the Moses Mendelssohn Foundation, a Jewish organization that advocated for religious tolerance and intellectual engagement. Kube pursued studies in history, political science, and theology at the Friedrich Wilhelm University in Berlin, and became a member of the German Nationalist Student Association, which was known for promoting nationalist, conservative, and anti-Semitic ideologies among students. After completing his studies, he worked as a journalist for several conservative publications. In late 1927, Kube joined the Nazi Party and quickly advanced through its ranks, becoming the chairman of the Nazi Party faction in the Prussian state parliament. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. In September 1933, Kube was appointed to the Prussian State Council by Prussian Minister-President Hermann Göring. Several weeks later, he joined the SS, and in January 1934, he was promoted to SS Gruppenführer, equivalent to the rank of Major General. While Kube and other high-ranking officials enjoyed the benefits of the Nazis being in power, the regime's rise marked the beginning of a dark chapter for many German citizens, especially the Jews. The Nuremberg laws of 1935 stripped Jews of their citizenship and prohibited them from marrying or having sexual relations with non-Jews. Economic and social life became increasingly restricted, leading many Jews to seek refuge abroad. By the time Hitler was appointed Chancellor, there were approximately 523,000 Jews living in Germany. However, from 1933 to 1939, approximately 282,000 Jews fled the country, seeking safety in places like the United States, Palestine, and the United Kingdom. Those who stayed were removed from the economic life of Germany by transferring Jewish-owned businesses, properties, and assets to Aryan or non-Jewish ownership. Jews were forced to sell their businesses and properties, often at a fraction of their actual value. Once they were economically marginalized, Jews were systematically deported to concentration and extermination camps, where they were killed. Amid this growing persecution, Kube's dedication to Nazi ideology became increasingly clear, and he is also known to have said about Jews, "What plague and syphilis are to humanity are Jews to the white race." By 1934, his eliminationist anti-Semitism was on full display when he made a chilling statement about the Jewish minority, declaring that the carrier of the plague must be eradicated. In late 1935, the Supreme Party court led by Chairman Walter Buch, the father-in-law of Martin Bormann, who had later become Hitler's private secretary, began an investigation into Kube. The inquiry was prompted by allegations of adultery and corruption, including nepotism, favoritism, and a dictatorial management style. In December of the same year, Kube received a formal letter of reprimand, which officially documented the party's disapproval of his actions. Swearing revenge, he sent an anonymous letter accusing Buch of being married to a half-Jew. This claim had serious implications not only for Buch, but also for Bormann, as it raised questions about the Aryan purity of Bormann's wife. When investigation revealed that it was Kube who had written the letter, he was removed from all his positions and resigned from the SS to avoid a dishonorable expulsion. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. In 1940, Kube was rehabilitated as an SS member by Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, and employed at the Dachau concentration camp. On Sunday, the 22nd of June 1941, under the code name Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. For Nazi Germany, this attack was not an ordinary military operation. The war against the Soviet Union was a war of annihilation between German fascism and Soviet communism, a racial war between German Aryans and subhuman Slavs and Jews. Following the invasion of the Soviet Union, the Nazi regime unleashed a campaign of unprecedented brutality. As the German military advanced, Nazi forces including the SS and Einsatzgruppen, which were Nazi mobile death squads, systematically targeted civilians, particularly Jews, communists and other groups deemed undesirable by Nazi ideology. Entire villages were wiped out in mass executions, and millions of Soviet prisoners of war were subjected to starvation, forced labor, and summary execution. In July 1941, Kube was appointed Generalkommissar, meaning Commissioner General for Weißruthenien, today's Belarus, with his headquarters in Minsk. In this role, Kube oversaw the extermination of the large Jewish population of this area. He was nevertheless outraged by the Slutzk affair in October 1941, a massacre that stands as a stark example of the brutal methods employed by the Nazis in the Soviet Union. Over the course of a few days, Nazi Einsatzgruppen and auxiliary forces rounded up thousands of Jewish men, women, and children in the town of Slutzk. They were subjected to unimaginable violence, beaten, humiliated, and forced from their homes. Victims were marched to mass execution sites outside the town, where they were shot in large numbers and buried in hastily dug pits. The massacre was carried out without any coordination with local Nazi civil authorities, leading to chaos and destruction that alarmed certain Nazi officials including Kube, due to the unregulated and indiscriminate nature of the violence. Kube wrote in protest to his supervisor, Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler. The town was a picture of horror during the action, with indescribable brutality on the part of both the German police officers and particularly the Lithuanian partisans. The Jewish people, but also among them Belarusians, were taken out of their dwellings and herded together. Everywhere in the town, shots were heard, and in different streets the corpses of shot Jews accumulated. The Belarusians were in greatest distress to free themselves from the encirclement. I am submitting this report in duplicate so that one copy may be forwarded to the Reich Minister. Peace and order cannot be maintained in White Ruthenia with methods of that sort. To bury seriously wounded people alive who work their way out of their graves again is such a base and filthy act that the incidents as such should be reported to the Führer and the Reichsmarshal. Lithuanian partisans were Lithuanian anti-communist fighters, thus collaborators with the Nazis during the first months of the German occupation of Lithuania during World War II. Although Kube was involved in the Holocaust, he initially opposed the deportation and planned extermination of German Jews within his jurisdiction. Even though he made it clear that he was willing to assist in solving the so-called Jewish question, he considered German Jews as part of the German cultural sphere, distinct from non-German Jews, whom he described as indigenous, brutalized hordes. He particularly objected to the deportation of old frontline soldiers who had been decorated for their service in World War I, and Jewish mixed-race individuals. In at least one case, he managed to transfer a decorated World War I veteran, Karl Loewenstein, to Theresienstadt, where Loewenstein survived the war. Although Kube was a staunch anti-Semite, his actions were marked by contradictions. When the systematic mass killings of local Jews were to be resumed at the urging of the civil administration in late March 1942, Kube reportedly insisted on proper procedure during the liquidation to avoid chaos and maintain control over the operations. Later, he appealed to the Reich Security Main Office and sabotaged a liquidation action against Jews in the Minsk Ghetto, led by SS Obersturmbannführer Eduard Strauch. Kube opposed Strauch's harsh methods, calling them unworthy of a German person and of a nation of Kant and Goethe. In response, Strauch recommended Kube's dismissal to Obergruppenführer Erich von dem Bach, accusing Kube of failing to distinguish between Germans and German Jews. Moreover, Kube reportedly called a policeman who shot a Jew a pig, and warned the Jewish council in Minsk when they were instructed to prepare 5,000 Jews for resettlement, which meant certain death. Kube's behavior continued to be marked by contradictions, and despite his earlier misgivings, he took part in a horrific act on the 2nd of March 1942 in the Minsk Ghetto. During a raid conducted by German and Belarusian police, a group of children from the ghetto's nursery or orphanage were seized and thrown into deep pits of sand to die. At that moment, several SS officers, including Kube, arrived at the scene. Spotless in his uniform, Kube tossed handfuls of sweets to the terrified, screaming children, and then walked away. None of the children survived, as they were buried alive in the sand. Wilhelm Kube himself was a married man with a family. With his wife Anita Maria, who was 24 years his junior, they had 2 sons. Peter, born in 1936, and Walter, born in 1943. Kube's actions grew increasingly brutal in the following months as he continued to support the Nazis' objectives. By September 1942, he emphasized in a directive that the strong presence of Jews among the partisans could only be countered by cleansing the land of Jews. Kube raised no objections to the killing of German Jews who were unable to work, and in May 1943, he showed a gas chamber in use to a group of Italian fascists. During 1942, he ordered mass murders of Jews and justified his orders with the fear of disease outbreaks in the Jewish ghettos. Moreover, he personally benefited from Jewish property that had been confiscated and used his position to enrich himself at the expense of the victims. In June 1943, Kube wrote to the Reich Minister for the occupied Eastern Territories, Alfred Rosenberg, the following: "The fact that Jews receive special treatment requires no further discussion. Imagine only that these occurrences would become known to the other side and exploited by them. Most likely, such propaganda would have no effect, only because people who hear and read about it simply would not be ready to believe it." By special treatment, Kube meant extermination. In the end, Kube's crimes caught up with him. Wilhelm Kube was 55 years old when on the 22nd of September 1943, he was assassinated in his Minsk apartment by a time device hidden in his mattress. The bomb was placed by a Soviet partisan, Yelena Mazanik, a Belarusian woman who had been hired in Kube's household as a maid and who was later convinced to assassinate him. Due to Kube's critical attitude towards some SS anti-Jewish actions, Himmler reportedly described the assassination as a blessing. Nevertheless, in retaliation, the SS killed more than 1,000 male citizens of Minsk. Mazanik escaped the reprisals and continued to fight with the partisans. In October 1943, she was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest distinction for bravery and service to the Soviet state and society. More than 2 million Belarusians were killed during the Second World War, accounting for approximately 25% of the total population, the highest proportion of any country involved in the war. It is estimated that around 800,000 Jews, or 90% of the Jewish population of Belarus, were murdered during the Holocaust, countless of them at the hands of Nazi war criminals such as Wilhelm Kube. There were no tears shed for Wilhelm Kube.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.